Hi, welcome. We are so excited about this webinar today. I have three amazing women that are joining me on the panel. Hello, my name's Dawn Whitney. I'm the SVP of Client Engagement at Level Up. We are a global certified minority-owned business, and we offer personalized talent and consulting services, including RPO, MSP, contingent staffing, HR advisory, and executive search. So I'm very excited to kick this thing off, and I have a couple of quick little announcements that I wanted to share with you. We're outside of Level Up being based in New York, we also have some global locations, Canada, South Africa, Hong Kong, and in the UK. And just like these ladies who are my guests today, I've been in the staffing business for almost 27 years now, which is crazy. And I work hand in hand with our clients to develop a customized solution for many of their talent acquisition challenges. I love the healthcare space. I can't imagine being in any other vertical. I live half time here in Portland, Oregon, and then I leave the rain, which is here now. Well, it's coming for the sunshine, and I head to California for the rest of the year. I have a 29-year-old son, and here at work, but specifically in my personal life, I am a mental health and wellness champion. I have a 5-star rated podcast on Apple dedicated to mental health, addiction, and the LGBTQ plus community. So for me, this topic around DE&I and allyship is a very, very personal one. So a little bit of housekeeping things. We will have, a very interactive type of webinar today. We're excited about that. If you have any questions while you're watching this, please put them in the chat, and then the panelists will be able to see them. We also have a couple of fun polling questions. So a poll will pop up in the middle of your screen, and we'll show you the results after the questions have been answered. So I think we're ready to get started, and I'm just thrilled to present our three powerhouse women executives to tackle how we collectively move the needle on DE&I and who really holds the power to drive that lasting change. Is it allyship that's effective for the change? Do we recognize that microaggressions are present in the workplace? Have they gotten any better? Yes, we're going to talk about pay equity again. Sorry, it's happening. And how about unconscious bias, which I know is a really important thing to talk about. Sunitha has some good thoughts on that as well. The imposter syndrome, code switching. I mean, we got a whole bunch of good things going on today. And one of my most important things, I want to make sure people that are watching, especially some people who are entering into the workforce or who are wanting to grow in their career, we want to be able to talk about how to be a mentor and create your own board of directors. Sound good? So I'm excited to bring everybody together. My first guest is Wanda Cole Freeman, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about Wanda, and then I'm going to have her go ahead and fill in the blanks. So she is the SVP of Talent Acquisition for Common Spirit Health and was named by San Francisco Business Times as a most influential woman in the Bay Area business in 2021. Believing that giving back to the community is important, Wanda has extensive nonprofit board experience. And Wanda and I had the opportunity to meet and begin a relationship in 2022 while working with Common Spirit when we were putting together an RPO project. In my interactions with Wanda and her staff, which I loved, by the way, I was very impressed with the focus that their team had on not only the DE&I initiatives, but their attention to mental health and wellness of their employees. And we know that there's a lot of companies that are talking the talk, but not necessarily walking the walk every day. And I was very impressed to see that Common Spirit does definitely do that. So she's in very high demand on the speaking circuit, and I'm thrilled that she agreed to participate. I did maybe stalk her a little bit, but she said yes. So Wanda, we'd all love to hear a little bit more about your background. Please give us some more info. Oh, I think you're muted. Sorry about that. Oh, you're unable to unmute. Interesting. Let me see if I can help you. Oh, there you go.
I think I'm good now. Thank you so
All right.
much. I apologize. I had a little note that said the host didn't let me unmute, so I'm
Oh,
happy.
that's okay. Sorry. I had this great intro and then I was like, where is she?
No, I loved your great intro. And I was going to say, I need to wake up like that every day, like having Don Whitney in my corner every day. It's
Love it.
such a pleasure to be here. And thank you. So as Don mentioned, I lead the recruiting function for Common Spirit Health. We are a $38 billion healthcare system across the nation, serving 1 in 4 Americans. And my team hires between 55 and 60,000 caregivers, corporate folks annually. And I thank you for shouting out my team. They are truly a fabulous team, and I am blessed and fortunate every day to learn from them and work alongside them. Outside of work, like Dawn, I am a mother. I have boy-girl twins who are 20 years old and out of the house temporarily. Guess they're quasi-adulting, and really active, as Dawn mentioned, on boards and doing fun things with my husband when we can. Now that we are I stole this from someone else, free birding versus empty nesting. So I will turn it back to you and
Like that.
the opportunity.
Great. We're so excited to have you, Wanda. Our next guest is Sunitha Shamarty, and Sunitha is a very highly respected technology executive. She's been both a CTO and a CIO. She's an active board member of Wings. I was really excited when I read this, Sunitha. You and I need to talk about this offline. But Wings is a nonprofit that stands as a beacon of hope for victims of domestic violence. And I know that's a passion project for you, so I'm excited about that. She was recommended to me by a very highly influential CIO that told me he was going to be listening today, so we'll see. And he told me that she's an impressive technology woman, Dawn, that you absolutely need to know. So I now currently have the honor and opportunity to assist Sunitha in her next job search. And any organization would be lucky to have her. So Sunitha, please give us a little bit of information about your background.
Thank you, Dawn. That was really lovely. And it's, sometimes you come across people and it just, you instantly click, and you're just one of those. And I'm so glad to have you in my network. So I spent a few decades in the technology industry and predominantly in leadership roles. Had the fortune of actually working with global companies and globally diverse teams. And so this topic is very close to home. In terms of what it means for us to be culturally aware of our team members and what should you say, how should you say it, and how do you interact and be sensitive about them. I'm a mother of 2 as well. I grew up and did my early education in India. And then both my husband and I, through our academic and professional pursuits, had the opportunity of actually living in 3 countries. We've lived in Germany, we've lived in New Zealand, and now in the US. It's given me both my husband and myself and my children a broad perspective of the cultural awareness and really helped us kind of look at ourselves as more global citizens. Outside work, I enjoy gardening and I enjoy reading books, and community work is very close to my heart. So as I have time, just as Dawn mentioned, I wrapped up a M&A activity early this year and took some time to actually be with my family and specifically my mother in India. And I'm back now in the market, and I'm looking forward to the next opportunity. So we live in Chicago downtown, and what you see behind me, and everyone loves my view, is Lake Michigan. It's a nice, sunny, bright day, so that's why you can't see the lake, but this is where we are. 2 boys are working, and they are living their dream and finding their opportunities here in the US.
Oh, I love it. Yes, I'm very jealous of your background. It's so calming, right? Wanda, we were both saying that when we got on. We're like, wow, she looks so cozy.
Beautiful.
Okay, well, I'm excited. I think Tanya has joined us. Tanya Jackman Hampton, are you there? Are you in the house?
I am here, yes.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
thank you. And Yes, it worked out, and so for the audience, I was ending a interview for somebody to join our team at UC San Diego Health. And so that was a hard stop that I had to jump right over, and I was here on time, but then the link that
Perfect.
I had is now available. So thank you.
Oh,
But
great. Well, let me just,
yeah.
before you jump in, I'm gonna say some nice
Okay,
things about
perfect.
you.
I will be quiet.
Okay. So yeah, so Tanya is the CHRO, as she just mentioned, for UC San Diego Health. She's an award-winning executive with over 30 years of experience working for Fortune 500 companies and nonprofit organizations. I was really impressed when I was reading your bio. There's a lot in there, which I'm going to let you talk about, but I was like, wow, she's very accomplished. And some of the things that you were doing, I was like, I don't even know what that is. So please share. But I had the opportunity to meet Tanya at a healthcare event about a year ago when she was working for Hennepin. And I was also present to see her win a well-deserved award at that event. We instantly connected. We had some great conversations at the event, and it led us to an opportunity to start a relationship to work together at Hennepin. And then she was wooed away to the sunshine and ripped out and landed at UC San Diego, which actually I know was great for you, but was even more exciting for me because I grew up in San Diego. So immediately I started sending you restaurants to go to and places to visit. So I'm really glad that this has worked out in timing. And just like Wanda, I also stopped you for this webinar. So thank you for finally saying yes, because I know you're very busy. So now I would love to hear about all of your background and all your credentials, which I think are really important for the topic of this conversation today.
Thank you, Dawn, and I appreciate the comments and relay support. I will say that the background that I have, I've had the fortune of having different opportunities, different experiences that I've been in and out of, and also different organizations. I would say that a lot of the reason is related to just networking and mentoring and allyship. So it's very ironic that we're having this conversation today. As you mentioned, we found each other when I was living in Minnesota. We actually met in San Diego, which is pretty fascinating. It was the conference for what we were both attending. And I've always wanted to be in California, and I thought it was a far stretch for me to get here until UC San Diego Health came on the map. So the story goes like this, that I was a kid and we drove all the way to California in a 1979 Ford station wagon. There was 8 people deep. It was back in the day. I'm dating myself, but I don't care. Age is just a number. And it was a time when you could sit in the back hatch with no seatbelt. So my brother and I were sitting in the back. The rest of the family was distributed throughout. We collected stickers along the way, and California was the destination. We hadn't made it to San Diego. We went to LA and Oakland and San Francisco because we had family there. But then I learned a little bit more about San Diego by my husband, actually, who was inspired to go. And I always said, I'm not sure, until I actually had the opportunity to go when my son was a teenager. He was interested in going to San Diego after we had visited for a period of time. He didn't quite make it. But then fast forward, when I got the opportunity in front of me for San Diego, my husband said, you should apply. I said, okay. So I did. And then I got the opportunity, and my son was like, oh, I'm there already. So he actually will be joining me in December. So I'm excited about that. My husband will remain in Minnesota until 2025 because he's in law school. He got a second life jolt, so to speak, and is thrilled about the experience to do that, and will continue down that path, along with still balancing his other career, which is he's a professor. So you've learned I've got a son. I've got also a daughter, and she's 28. She will remain here. The rest of my family is here. My father, sister, brother, 2 brothers, actually. I did lose my mother in 2016. I keep that pretty present because she's always going to be in my spirit. But I am excited about our conversation and getting to know all of you. My credentials, I think that maybe what's necessary to share, because I don't want to keep talking, is just that from an educational perspective, I am grounded in that. I happen to have a grandmother who believed in my education. Along with her and my parents, they supported me and gave me the opportunity to go to college, first, generation student. And so from there, I've always prided myself in getting education. and looking at ways to grow and lead in that regard. So that's all I'll say. I'm happy to answer any questions that are more detailed as we go throughout. Thank you.
Great. Well, this is quite an impressive trio that I have here today, and I'm really excited about this. I also love how the three of you did not know each other and instantly just jumped right in, especially about this topic, which was great. So now that everybody knows what we're in for here, let's talk about some stats, which I think is really the reason why this conversation is important. There's obviously been some gains and some growth over the years, but there really hasn't been nearly as enough as we'd like, as evidenced, excuse me, by the stats that we're about to see. So I thought this was pretty interesting. This shouldn't be shocking to really anyone that's looking at any of this, but 70%, and this is actually going to be a question we're going to be talking about as the panelists answer, but 70% of the companies aspire to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, and only 47% of them have the necessary infrastructure and or support in place to achieve these goals. Is that we believe in that stat, ladies? Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yes.
And this is a pretty interesting stat. Vivian and I were looking at this, Vivian, who's in our marketing team, and we were both really not surprised, but we thought it was an interesting stat to put here, that 50% less employee turnover happens in organizations that foster strong allyship and inclusion cultures. You know, I think that just to kind of touch on that, organizations that, in my opinion, foster allyship and inclusion cultures are really, really important. And right now, from the stats that we uncovered, 56% or more likely to improve their performance if they feel that from their organization. 75% are less likely to take a sick day, and up to 167% are more likely to recommend their organization as a great place to work. I love that. This is just such a perfect entree into kind of our questions. Right there in the middle of our screen, you'll see that only 30% of workers feel unsupported. Well, I shouldn't say only, it's a large amount, feel unsupported at their workplace due to aspects of their identity. And of course, this one was kind of an interesting stat. And I think all three of you probably already knew it, but about one fourth of the women are C-suite leaders, and then only 1/16 of them are represented by women of color. Is that a new stat to anyone?
Sadly,
Unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
No.
I know. And then let's just talk about the pay equity. I mean, I looked at my husband last night and I was like, oh, did you know this stat? He was like, I don't know how to answer this question. What are you asking me? I said, oh yeah, we're still earning quite a bit less, 20% less than the man doing the same job. So my husband, you know, quickly said, oh, I have something I need to go do in the other room. We didn't get into that, but these stats here, I think, are really shining a light on the framework of this conversation today. Do you all agree?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
And there's so much more to kind of jump into, but let's just kind of start with our first question. So I'll start with Wanda on this. I'd love to hear, Wanda, your personal experience around this or whatever you'd like to share. But in the context of DE&I, how do you define the role of allies personally, or within the workplace if you want to talk about that? And maybe you can share how allyship has helped you in your career and maybe give a little bit of advice.
Yeah, thanks for the question. For me, I talk a lot about allyship in the sense of having people in your corner, and they don't always have to look like you and think like you and come from where you've come from, but having empathy and having that mutual respect for each other, I think is really important. And it's someone who doesn't necessarily, I mean, I think there are different ways that people can show up as allies. And I think depending on the scenario, and sometimes at work, it can be I think a little more precarious because people, depending on the environment, may not want to like lean in, but I do think there are different ways. So sometimes it's just individual, right? And somebody may pull you aside or give you a call after a meeting. Have an example of that, which we can get into later. That just says, hey, I'm checking in because this is what I observed, right? And then sometimes it's like they want to co-create with you around how we can potentially in the workplace, in this case, structurally try to start making some changes around culture and how things happen. And so how people show up can be different. And at different points in their career and when they feel like they can reach back or reach to the side and help pull people up. But for me, allyship is just having folks who are willing to stand alongside and not necessarily always agree or understand because they've been there, but have empathy for what your experience may be. So I'll stop there.
Yes, I love that. Sunitha, you had some interesting thoughts around this too. We're going to go to you on the question. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, and this is a good point to talk about unconscious bias.
Yeah, I think I've got a slightly different perspective that I wanted to bring forward. Is as a woman of color, it's very common that you come across situations where you're treated differently. But today we're talking about DE&I, but when I started my career in a few years ago, this wasn't the forefront of the conversation. And many times, and personally about myself, you kind of actually get into the acceptance of this is the norm, right? And that I feel is the biggest hurdle, which is we as individuals, before you can even ask for allyship or before you can even reach out, you've got to recognize and acknowledge that, you know what, you are being treated differently. And that's not okay, right? So for me, that was the biggest hurdle, because for many years, I just kind of kept thinking, you know what, this is how it's going to be. This is what it is going to be. This is how I will be. I just have to accept and I have to work harder. I have to just do the same thing 3 times more so that I actually get my due. Once you've accepted that, then you can actually start to speak, and then the allyship comes in. I've actually, while I have had my challenges, I've actually been very, very, blessed that I've had some amazing leaders, men and women in my life, who had my back. And I sometimes, when I reflect back, in fact, when we started to have this conversation, I reflected back and I said, there are many times where I was the first. I was one of the first ones who, got opportunities. And so I've got to give it back to those leaders who felt it is okay. And they didn't see that as a differentiator. So I think I remind everyone today, yes, this is in the forefront of the conversation, but only, like you pointed out, only 47% of the companies actually do have DE&I as a policy. So there are still that remaining companies where this is not at the forefront and there isn't a conversation. So start with yourself. Remember that you have the opportunity to say, why should I be different? Why is it that I don't have that same opportunity?
Yes,
Yep.
Absolutely. Gosh, I love that. I love that perspective. Tanya, I would love for you to discuss maybe a little bit around this topic, around how your organization supports that and kind of brings visibility to create allyship. It would be great to hear from you on that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And so what I'll speak about is from a strategy standpoint, and then very specifically, how does allyship or mentorship tie into that? Our organization, from addressing healthcare disparity standpoint, it's been that DEI or healthcare disparity has been at the forefront of our work. And yet behind it, we, from a strategy standpoint, establishing the infrastructure and the work plan for the activities and being intentional about it, started about 2-3 years ago. And so now the actions that we were taking from a healthcare perspective to mitigate disparities are being married up with a strategic plan for direction that we think we need to take based on our patient base and the market, as well as trying to be even more proactive than what we were historically. The infrastructure then, as a result, is a younger infrastructure for the organization to support that work. And so, as you can imagine, some of the initial activities that are needed for establishing DEI or healthcare disparities are getting going. Meanwhile, there certainly is a heuristic of the organization that is focused on belonging and caring. So ensuring that we are an organization that is leading the way, where everyone feels feels like they belong and are cared for. And with that context, then colleague to colleague, there is allyship and mentorship that happens naturally. Also, because we are an academic system, there is a infrastructure that is established from a teaching perspective to teach academic or faculty individuals about the academic space that we are in at UCSD, as well as there is a research startup, right? So you go from residency into an actual position at UCSD, where you are working non-residentially, but you would have had to have gone through a number of different mentoring and ally type experiences where you've got colleagues that are helping you. So those are organic efforts, yet things that are established too by requirement because of the type of hospital we are. We're a magnet hospital. We have to have in place certain mechanisms to ensure that we've got teaching back and forth from different individuals in their capacity. And so that provides the opportunity to have mixed matches, whether they are individuals that are of diverse background, at least visibly, right, or not, where people are benefiting from those relationships to really get their feet landed and be successful. Longer term, we will continue to build out what you might see in other organizations, whether it's employee resource groups or mentor and development opportunities that are intentionally focused on individuals of color or women or other types of diversity to be able to develop their experiences.
That's great. Wow. So I would love to do a poll right now and see what our audience that's listening, watching, might have to say around this topic. So the question is, and you'll see this pop up, do you have allies at or outside of work? So please take a moment to check yes or no, and then we'll get to see the results, which will be exciting. Such an important topic, and boy, I have to tell you from a personal perspective, this probably came late in life for me. I didn't really have any allies until much later in life. And so I think Wanda and I were talking about this earlier. We both are really focused on making sure that, well, we all probably have the same feeling that we want to bring women and men, others forward, to have, a voice and to be seen and heard, where we can help them be we can be a strong ally and a strong mentor for them. And so that's really an important initiative that I think we all have, because maybe we didn't all have it at the same time early in our careers. And we know how important it is to have. So, so here's the results. Oh, this is great. So wonderful. Good to see that there are some people that have allies. What would you ladies say to the people that don't have it, that don't have allies right now? This might be a great conversation around developing a board of directors. Let's just go right into that. Who wants to answer?
I'm happy to take that. I
Great.
know I call it my personal board of directors, and I probably got that from someone else too, but I like to take things that work for me,
Yes.
and incorporate them in my life. And it doesn't have to be super formal. So I think that's the first thing. It doesn't have to be super formal, but for me, it's kind of like, and it changes also. So I would also say that, like, I'm a 50+ woman who feels like I've had an opportunity to do the grind at work and try to establish myself. And when I was doing that, I needed something different from people, right? And I also wasn't as secure in who I was and the things that I needed. And as I've developed and been able to have opportunities, that changes, right? I'm not necessarily reaching for that next title. It's really for me around, how do I deliver impact, to your point? How do I help others? what's my legacy going to be on helping people grow, develop, sustain? So for me, first of all, my mom, I talk to her almost every day, which probably seems excessive for a 50-plus-year-old woman, but she's my go-to. She's the first to lift me up and the first to be like, what you talking about, Willis? I don't think that's gonna work, right? So I need that person in my life who knows me intensely and deeply and has my best interest at heart, but also is a toughie sometimes. So my mom is definitely always on that list. What I need her for and how I need her may change. And then I have a couple of people who are work colleagues and people who are tangential to work, whether I've met them through, you know, boards that I've served on or associations I've been involved in that have really helped round out. And so I tend to not be the most entrepreneurial person. So I have someone in my personal board of directors who is entrepreneurial because I want to be thinking about how do I keep challenging myself to be innovative? What does that really mean? And like, not to like think that, you know, I need to innovate just to innovate, but what does it really mean? And so I have someone that when I'm in those moments, I can reach out to. And she's an amazing friend and mentor and sponsor of me. And so I think I would encourage people, to your question, Dawn, that if you don't feel like you have someone, and maybe you answered that question because you thought it had to be like this formal thing that you know, had a meeting with them and said, will you be my mentor? Will you be on my personal board of directors? You probably do. It's just about how you utilize them and how you use them. And if you really don't, I would encourage you to kind of be thinking about where do you want to be in 2 years, in 5 years, and who do you have in your life or who do you aspire to in your life that you can create those authentic connections with to create whatever that is for you, a personal board of directors, somebody who's a sponsor, a mentor, because I think life is richer when you're able to grow with others and grow from others. So I'll stop there because I know we have an esteemed panel who have lots of wonderful ideas to also add.
Yeah,
I love that.
I agree with you, Wanda. And for me, it was my dad, and he was my biggest critic. You know, you pick up the phone, you share something, and you want to brag about something, and then he brings you back to the ground and says, "Yeah, it's great. Well, what did you do about this?" Right? So, unfortunately, I lost him in 2021, and I'm still haven't found that person who can be so straight and I think about it more as I think I am on the speed dial for several of my teams, and they reach out and they say, hey, I've fallen into this situation. What do I do? How should I go about it? And I don't have the answers all the time. We work through it and we talk through it. And sometimes I actually walk away from that experience thinking, if that were to happen, maybe this is the approach. You know, and a leader who I'm still always in touch with always used to say this phrase, and I tell myself that many times when I'm having a tough day: come into your power. She always used to say, come into your power. And she said, which is realize your strength and realize your influence and your abilities. And sometimes, you know what, you do need that pick me up and reminder to say, you know what, come into your power, because you can sometimes find the answers. But to everyone who said they don't have, I'm putting my name out there. Reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation, only because there were others who continue to be in my life. And I have speed dial numbers where I will pick up the phone and I will talk to. And I'm one of those people who never feel shy about asking a question. I'll just ask, what's the worst thing? Sometimes you may get a no, but I at least will ask that question.
I love that. Yes, I mean, having a board of directors is so important. And I was working with some teams here at Level Up, and one of the ladies that I'm working with asked me, you know, Dawn, where I'm entering the workforce, what advice do you have for me that, you know, would help me grow? And I said, you've got to get a board of directors. And she kind of looked at me and she was like, what does that look like? And so I walked her through it. I said, make sure the people on your board of directors are different from you. They look different than you. And it can be men or women, women of color, men of color, whatever, you know, LGBTQ plus community, what have you, you know, make sure that you find those people. And she said, well, how do I do that? I said, well, you got to look just like what Wanda, you both, you and Sunitha said, you have your core people that are maybe family or colleagues that you go to when you need them, but they also can be strangers.
Mhm.
They can also be someone that we were just talking about the CEO, the president and CEO of Blue Shield of Massachusetts right before this call. And Tanya, I don't know if you were listening to that, but she has a post on LinkedIn around talking about, how did she say it, Wanda? How did she phrase it? I forget.
I think apparently it's World Menopause Day.
It's World Menopause Day, ladies.
And
We're going to
so
shift the topic
she
slightly.
said that basically, she said she's shifting the conversation to allow women at her organization to talk openly about menopause, and has resources and other things. So yeah, it's pretty inspiring.
Her name is
Talking
Sarah,
about it.
and Sarah doesn't know that she's my new mentor.
Yeah.
I'm setting, she's on my board of directors. I already sent her a message.
It's okay to fangirl. I totally was fangirling over the former Prime Minister of New Zealand a couple weeks ago.
Exactly.
At her, and she's quite remarkable.
He is remarkable. Speaking of fangirling, I did kind of slightly fangirl over Tanya. Tanya, do you want to speak on this topic?
Yeah, thank you, Dawn. I would say that, board of directors, I have held close to my sort of practice as I think about how I cultivate my own ability into, different opportunities. I would also say there's the sort of board director crowd, right? So you've got, we know the language of network, but that's come to me, that term of board of director crowd in this conversation. Because your board of directors can be in and out of your life, and your need to partner and get insight from different people is always constant. And what's important is to be able to cultivate relationships that you have and take them seriously, so that you are able to lean on or engage with people that maybe you haven't had the opportunity to do so for a period of time. What does that look like? Try to make the last experience that you've had with that person the best experience, or a memorable experience. So that when if time goes by, because we all know it does, whether it's you get the sort of the meme that I get, oh, I haven't called them for a while, I'm not sure if I should because I've got to ask them something. That hopefully gets minimized, because you can reflect on the last experience you had with them and realize that it was a memorable experience, enjoyable, and reaching to them probably is just as exciting for you as it is for them. By you saying, hey, gosh, it's been a long time since I talked to you, and name it. I haven't talked to you for a while, but I do have a question I want to ask you. I do want something from your perspective, your thought leadership that you can offer that I'd love to be in conversation with you about. And try to put that awkwardness on the table and then engage, and it actually becomes an exciting piece of conversation. So within your sort of board of director crowd, being mindful of who are there people that can help you along the way at the right points in time, I think is essential. And I think, again, it's essential to make sure that your connections are ones that you genuinely, extend to other people, so that it's a serious kind of endeavor.
I love that. Well, we have a question, which is great. And we can just have each of you answer this if you'd like, or we can just have a couple. So in your experience, what role does leadership play in creating a culture where diverse perspectives are valued and heard? Oh, I love it. Who wants to take this one?
I can go first, and I think I'll tie it back to the unconscious bias conversation, Dawn, that you had mentioned. As leaders, two things. One is, when you just go back to the fundamentals of DE&I, it's just so basic, right? It's not that earth-shattering. All you're saying is treat everyone equally, create equal opportunities, and avoid bias. And training is where I felt it had the most amount of impact. And in my previous company, we went through training called unconscious bias, and then they play through certain scenarios, and then they say, how would you react? And trust me, literally most of them, and if not all of them, had aha moments, because what you don't realize is ingrained bias that you may be having with yourself that you've not addressed, and it may come out, and you're not even aware of it. So I feel like training is absolutely one area. The more we can have those conversations, the more we can actually be, it comes to a forefront as training, it actually helps. And I have another one, but I'll let the other panelists chime in and I can come back.
Great. Wanda,
Yeah.
Tanya?
I'm sorry,
ahead,
Wanda.
Tanya. Please go ahead.
I was just going to offer up that, being a model at the senior leadership level is necessary. And having buy-in from your senior leadership on this particular effort and set of initiatives that go along with it is also necessary. And it has to be there has to be some truthness to it, that people really are willing to do the work and sit in uncomfortable spaces. I think that the stat that we saw earlier, 47% of organizations that don't have the infrastructure, is a byproduct of organizations not able to make the commitment and not having a long-term set of executives that help to carry the weight with that DEI officer or the chief health equity officer or the HR leader, however the form sits in an organization for that role. And so absolutely necessary to be able to create a culture where people really feel like they can have diverse perspectives at the table, let alone being able to have the ability to contribute to conversations.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to ask you, maybe Wanda, you can jump in on this. I mean, how do you feel that leaders can ensure that DE&I efforts are not just a trend, but they're a lasting commitment within their organization with stats like what we just saw? What do you think?
Yeah,
what do you think from your
I was
perspective?
going to say I wholeheartedly support what Sunita and Tanya mentioned a few minutes ago. And I think the thread that I'd like to pick up on that I think Tanya said as well, representation matters, right? So it does matter to have folks there, but representation by itself without
Mhm.
accountability, take it or leave it, honestly. So I think Tanya mentioned folks showing up and walking the walk, right? I think that's so important. And I don't know, without that, I think it's hard to create cultures where people feel like they can show up as their whole selves, like they need to have diverse voice at the table. When I talk about diversity on my team, I mean, we're responsible for hiring, as I said, many of our associates and team members. I have people think about it like, don't just think about gender and ethnicity. You got to be thinking about diversity in ways that go beyond the boxes on an application or the boxes on, right? So, because I do believe that in this next phase of where we are, and I have to say, as much as they drive me crazy, I feel like my 20-year-olds push me to think differently, right?
Yes.
Especially around some of the topics du jour. But as we look at this next generation of people around the globe and how their, social media has brought everything forefront, it's touchable, people feel it, they can see it. We got to think about it differently because it's not so other to them to have somebody who doesn't look like them. It's not, that they admire or want to be like, but getting the context and the deepness around what that means for them beyond just, I like their music or I like their art or whatever it is, matters. And so I think bringing all kinds of people, I talk about having neurodiversity at the table. And I've been really stressing on our team so that I can feel like we're living it, is don't just ask me as a leader to bring you a diverse slate of candidates. Make sure that when I bring you that diverse slate, you're going to have a diverse slate of interviewers. So that person feels like if they're making that decision of whether they're coming to work for us, that they already know that they're going to be enveloped with people who live our values, who live our mission, and that they've got potentially people who may look like them or don't look like them, but they've got their backs. And so it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think given bite-sized milestones versus thinking you got to reach that, finish line so quickly, I think is helpful to all of us to think about it, because there are big structural things that we have to acknowledge, that we have to change. And in America, I think the layer is even deeper because there's a lot that we just have not honestly dealt with.
Right.
And so I guess I'll stop there, but I do think having some teeth in it and showing accountability and having people show up in ways that
Yes,
haven't done before matters, and it needs to come from the top.
it definitely needs to come from the top. I'm so glad you said that. Just to follow, kind of close this last question up. I know, Sunita, that what Wanda said is right up your alley. You were talking about the same thing, about having some kind of framework that holds the accountability of the organizations, right? You want to touch
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah, yeah. I think I wanted to actually ask Wanda a question based on what she said. Do you
Bring
do
it,
you
bring
actually
it.
think do you actually think that the next generation will be better than us and the previous in terms of inclusivity and diversity? And the reason I ask that is I don't know, when I have my conversation with my children, my sons, grown-up sons, it never seems to be a topic that bothers them. It almost they almost feel it's very silly that we even have to talk about it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah. And for me, I think
Great question.
it's a great question. And of course, there are always going to be pockets of ignorance in the world. So let's just put that aside in a box,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
We can't address all of that. But with me, maybe the LGBTQ gender identity piece is maybe more instructive here or easier
Yeah.
to grasp,
Yeah.
as a way that my kids show up every day.
Yeah.
You know, I'm grappling with labels and what does this mean and all of that. And they're just like, just call people their name,
Yeah,
treat them how they
exactly.
are. And so, yeah, I do have a lot of hope that this
Yeah.
generation already is demonstrating to us that they have empathy,
Mhm.
can
Yes.
think of things differently. Yeah, I do. I have a lot of hope. Now, as I said, there's always going to be that box of the groups that are there, but
Yeah.
I do. And my kids are helping me from different
Mhm.
perspectives.
Yeah.
You know, we had a lot of conversation a couple weeks ago because my son was wearing cornrows and he showed up with a do-rag at lunch. And, you know, he's challenging the way I think about how I
Mhm.
show up. And am I
Yeah.
showing up to him because I've been colonized and I've been, you know, like all of these things that I think they
Yeah.
continue to think,
Yeah.
you know, we may
Yeah.
not agree on where we end up, but
Yeah.
he, in this case, it was my son, is bringing forward, my daughter does it plenty as well, but bringing forward things that cause me to pause and say,
Mhm.
I don't know if I have a response, but I'm going to take that back and think about it.
Yep.
I'm going to educate myself on that. And
Hey,
then
Board of
let's have another
directors.
conversation.
Yeah.
right? So I do. I hope that answers your question. But I also am a glass half full person. So
I
that's
am
just my
loving
personality.
I am loving this I'm loving this right now because it's going to go right into microaggression. It's
Yeah.
just a perfect dovetail into this conversation. But I love what you said, Wanda, because my son is gay and suffers from mental health issues and is also addicted to fentanyl. And we have a very interesting life that looks very different than our next door neighbor, right? And this has been a lifelong battle that he's had. But very early on, I had some very unconscious bias around his identity. I really did. So he helped me, just like our children really do this. He helped me to understand. And when he started to get me into that world, I immediately went all in because I was like, okay, I need to understand the inequality that's happening here and how he's being treated, because I'm seeing it, and I'm seeing it at his work. I'm seeing how he's being treated by other people in the family. I wanted to go all in to understand this community and become an ally.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how our children
They do.
see
And
this.
you know, I have decided on some things, for better or for worse, and Tanya, I'd love to hear your point of view, and Sunita as well, that I may not understand everything.
Yep.
I might not understand it all. And I think that's been the beauty of having my Taylor and Isaac in my life. I may not understand it all, but having an appreciation for where someone else is
Having grace,
the key.
giving them
So
grace.
I think if
Yep.
we can, you know, find people in our lives that we can surround ourselves with, that come to the table. Again, as I said, I may not understand it all, but my job as a mom, especially as a mom, is to try to listen, learn, observe, and then keep iterating on where I think, because it's natural. We are raised by
Yes.
parents that my mom and dad were born in the 50s and the late 40s. Like, it's a
Yes.
completely different world from when they were born and how things were. And it is what it is. We all have our experiences, and it's just about figuring out, can we stop and listen? I think you said something before others joined, to listen, to understand, or to appreciate versus listen to
Yes.
respond all the time.
Listen to speak.
Make,
Right.
yeah, make a difference.
Yeah. Tanya, I'd love to get some input on this question. Well, it's not really a question, but just kind of this overall topic around microaggressions, because I pulled up some stats because I love the stats. And it was really interesting to see that, and I'll read this here for you, that women who experience microaggressions are much less likely to feel psychologically safe, which makes it harder for them to take risks and propose new ideas and raise concerns. And on top of this, 78% of women who face microaggressions self-shield at work. They adjust the way that they look or act in an effort to protect themselves. And also, many women code switch. And I really want to talk about that. I want to get your input on that. Trying to blend in, trying to avoid a negative reaction at work. Black women are more than twice as likely as women overall to code switch. And the LGBTQ plus women are 2.5 times more likely to feel pressure to change their appearance to be perceived as more professional. So what's your thought on that?
Wow, there's a lot there.
I know, sister.
So, and
Give
we
it
could
to me.
talk, right, we could talk about all those topics for a while, but
I know. Give it to me in 4 minutes.
Yeah, a few that resonate with me is absolutely, as a, Black woman, certainly feel like there is a code switch that happens for me. I would say that there are certainly circumstances, or I'll say it, the ways at which I might respond differently in the business world than how I might respond amongst a group of friends. That's just a given. It's sort of the level of comfort that you feel. But I think what's important in the former, in your work environment, is getting very clear on what it is that you value and what is important for the customer base that you're servicing, so that that can be your grounding for navigating and advocating for issues as they come up, and being able to push back on the microaggressions that do appear. I know how difficult it can be to not take microaggressions personally, and so it's seeing and hearing those microaggressions and reacting in a way that you still maintain your professionalism.
Mm-hmm.
I will also say that as a underrepresented individual, part of an underrepresented group, I try not to go to the behavior that's coming at me. I try not go to the space of, it's because I am, right? I try not to do that immediately, and look at the process and the issue and the challenge before I get to the deduction that it's because I am in that underrepresented group. But if I land there, and also there's an issue around those other elements, I absolutely use that as my reason for having that one-on-one conversation. And it's so important to do it, at least in my mind's eye, immediate. Now, not everybody's able to react in that immediate sense. So you have to be mindful that what's the emotion that you're going to get back if you approach someone immediately, and then decide, is that the type of person that you should approach? From an overall standpoint of dealing with people, I try to think about, and I'm sure we all could think about, this one person that we just don't get along with, or the one person that we just always disagree with, or the one person that represents beliefs that we don't believe in. If you can position yourself to think about, well, what would I do though if that person was in front of me and needed help? Really needed help, really needed support from a health perspective, would you be willing to do it? And I always want to get back to the answer of yes. And that is because that for me, and I didn't always hold this, love should start first. I think that that's the number one problem in the world, is that we don't start there first, and that we don't start with being human first either. And so, you know, I could name a politician that I don't agree with. But at the end of the day, I would really be willing, well, it might hurt a little bit, to have coffee with them, right? And understand, try to seek to understand and see if there's some line thread of agreement or way that I could learn from them, or vice versa. So, you know, the other message is being open. And there are also, you know, there's boundaries, right? Because there are people that are hurtful and harmful, that you don't want to put yourself in the space of. But, you know, are there broader environmental things that you can do to ultimately impact those individuals that might be in that? I love that sort of ignorant space that Wanda brought up. There is individuals that are just there. But the work that we all do, I think, influences the micro things that hopefully eventually lead up to that person that might be causing some microaggressions.
I love that. It really just comes down to grace, giving grace, having grace. It's
That's
really
right.
what it's all about. And I mean, that when I think about DE&I, you know, that should be in the center. That's the center. That's the core of what it's really all about. Wanda,
So
do you have
Dawn,
any?
just one,
Yes,
yeah,
go ahead.
sorry,
Sunita.
just one quick comment on that is
Yes,
we talked about leadership. What can leaders do?
yes.
There might be circumstances when you see that around you happening, be the one to take the first step to speak up,
I love that.
because not everyone may have the courage to do it. And
Mhm.
I'm speaking from my own personal experience. Many times you see it and you kind of accept it or try to deal with it, but for the better good of many others that might be experiencing the same, be the leader to stand up and actually take that conversation forward and get some
Mhm.
action on it, because it helps several others in the organization.
I want to do a really quick poll before we kind of wrap up with our last question, because we're talking about all of this in such a, I mean, there's so many elements of DE&I, right? And so much to unpack. We need like a whole nother webinar to get through all of it. But the question I would like to ask, that I'd like to poll, is, do you have a DE&I department or have ERGs at your organization? I'm curious to see if we still have some people that are on the webinar that are still joining us. I'd love to hear what they think here. Because this is important, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then as we're kind of rounding to the answers here and we're wrapping up in a couple of minutes, I want all of you to think about this question if you can. If there's one takeaway from this entire conversation, since we talked about so many different things, for our audience to remember, what would that be? So as soon as we get the poll answers here, oh, here we go. Look at this. Not surprising, is
It
it?
aligns to your metrics.
It aligns to the metrics.
47% only have DE&I policy at
Love
their
it.
company. So
I know, it's crazy. And I do love data. I don't love it as much as you do, Sunita, but I love it.
I'm a technologist, so yes.
I know you are. I know. So a technologist for hire, everyone. Let's not forget that.
Yes, I'm here available.
You're available. Okay, so let's answer that question. If there's one takeaway from the entire conversation for our audience to remember, what would that be? Wanda, why don't we start with you?
Oh, I was dreading you were going to start with me. Because there's so much to be said here, but I think I'll say two things. Have grace for yourself and others, and remember to take baby steps, right? Because you can't take on the whole organization or what. It's hard to do that, and be able to still show up every day and be kind to yourself. So I would say recognize that you can move an organization and create meaningful impact.
Yes.
Sometimes it doesn't mean that it has to be on the largest scale.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. Sunitha.
What I went through doesn't have to be the path for everyone. So always available for anyone who wants to share what's bothering them and what are the difficulties or what are the challenges that they're facing. And I'm happy to be on their board of directors.
Oh, I love that. Tanya.
I would echo what Sunitha and Wanda said, as well as just add that persistence is really important, and also taking care of yourself, because you have to have a lot of capacity for a lot of things in this space, and you won't have enough capacity if you don't take care of what you need first.
I love that. I would say in closing, and I say this to my teams here, is to just continue to be the beacon of light, right? Because people want to follow the light. They want to follow the good energy. They want to follow the people that help them feel empowered in who they are. And there's nothing greater in this world than helping people find their own power. There's nothing greater. And it's really all centered around the topics that we talked about today, even though, I mean, I feel like we kind of made DE&I a little sexy here, is kind of what I'm thinking. I'm just going to say it. I feel like we really brought a lot to the table for people to think about, that it's not just, I mean, there's so many pieces within DE&I that we were able to break down quite a bit in a really short amount of time. So I think we did that today, ladies. And it was an honor to be on the panel with all three of you. And thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for taking the time and wanting to give back. It's so important. So thank you.
Thank
Thank
you for
you.
the opportunity. Have a great day.
All
Yes,
right.
take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks
Bye.
so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.